All right, we're going to continue on this issue of probability times the gravity equals the burden. And in this case, translating it from the legal tort claim negligence formula into this, which is really kind of like Pascal's wager. The probability, for example, that Christianity is true versus the gravity that Christianity is true should equal your burden or duty to pursue evidence, okay, an argument on whether or not it's true and satisfy it to the right degree. Now, I give an example of this because we actually follow this formula of duty of intellectual inquiry based on this PGB formula. I'm going to give you an example. If I were in the middle of a lecture in class and I got a call from campus safety and I said, oh yeah, by the way, Lewis, we just got a call. Well, we had some ex-disgruntled student really hated your class, okay? And they said that, they put 100 pounds of C4 in your room and that it's set to go off in 5 minutes. But, our campus safety assessment people said, you know what? We did our own assessment and we decided that, there's only a 50% possibility that it's true. Is anybody going to stay in the room? No, okay? All right, well, let's back it up a little bit. How about there's only a 25% possibility that there's actually C4 in the room? No, nobody's staying in the room. No, they're going to trample each other in Christian love getting out of the room, okay? So, all right, yeah. All right, how about only a 10% possibility? Nope, still rushing out the door. 1%. Still rushing out the door, okay? Yeah, exactly. Probability, 1%. Gravity, 100% for physical death. So what do people do? They don't wait. It's only 1%. Why? Because the gravity is so high. Now think about that for the truth of Christianity, okay? If it's true, you either have ultimate blessing in love and blessedness and fellowship with God and each other, happiness for all eternity in the best possible way, or abject misery and pain and suffering and shame for all eternity. Yeah, guess what? Spiritual death for eternity is far worse than physical death, okay? So this is why if someone wants to spend 2 seconds contemplating that, even in light of physical death, they should have the same reaction in that PGB formula. If you even made a 1% case that Christianity is true, they should be scrambling for more evidence that it's true to see whether or not it's true. So this is why we start thinking about this. Again, I've used it dozens and dozens of times with people, and they have to acknowledge that the principle is right. But again, the problem is you've got to pray for people. If our gospel is hidden, it's hidden to those who's perishing, whose minds are blinded by the God of this age. With their bad hearts, they're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. You've got to pray that the Holy Spirit opens up their minds and hearts. All the blah, blah, to them, it's blah, blah. You can preach the gospel clearly, but they're like, no, because I have to admit that I'm wrong and that I have to, I'm ashamed and this and that. I don't want to do that. You've got to get the Holy Spirit, not you get the Holy Spirit, but petition and ask the Holy Spirit, again, to convict them and move them along. Now, this works for Christianity, it works for bioethics, it works for just about everything. I give you an example. When I was in law school, I used this. I was already a theologian for 10 years before I went to law school. And one thing, I was in a bioethics legal seminar, and it was great because in this bioethics legal seminar, there were 15 people in the seminar, 5 were Christians, 5 were either atheists or Wiccans, and 5 were very confused people who didn't know what they believed. And the room was basically divided for all the presentations accordingly. So it was funny because part of what we had to do is do research projects and do all this. And instead, I was paired with another gal who was a Christian. And essentially, it was a pro-life case. It had to do with little humans, aka embryos, frozen, and whether or not we're going to dispose of these little embryos. The clinic wanted to dispose of them, and the court had, in the scenario, we were appointed as the pro-life guardian ad litem of these embryos and trying to make the case to the court, basically to preserve them and do this and that. So here's the case. Which, by the way, if you are trying to make a case for pro-life, remember, the key is to make a case for essential personhood from conception. Because if what you've got, instead of functional personhood, which are oppositions, atheists, physicalists, and others use, they say, well, if you're not having every function of an adult human being at any moment, you're not a full human person. But no, we and the Bible argue ultimately for essential personhood, and that based on identity is that ultimately from the moment of conception, what you have are all the properties of a full human person. You have all the genetic and DNA, and the fact that, again, I give a longer lecture on this, but when the sperm and egg come together to make the zygote, you don't add any new genetic information to that. But what you've got, and again, in Christian theology, which can't be excluded from the equation, or moral philosophy or anything else, is that once the soul is attached to it, the soul is the driver that makes the body do what? Fulfill its genetic code. The body without the spirit is dead, and the body with the spirit is alive. And what does that mean? Is that that sperm and egg and full genetic code will fulfill its full bodily functions when the soul is attached to it, and souls don't gain or lose an intellect or will and emotions. So what you've got is a full human person from conception. And again, we'll add more to that as we go along, but the case is this, and this is how we use, for example, PGB in a bioethics kind of situation. For example, you give the example that, well, you give all the evidence, and I have about a 2-3 hour lecture on essential personhood that I give, because what we need to do is give all the evidences for why we should consider this an essential person from the moment of conception. But then the issue is how certain are we? Okay, that this is a person from the moment of conception. That's when we bring in PGB, probability that this is a person from conception, the gravity for ignoring it, okay? So here's where it's a great illustration, so you can steal it. I encourage you, this is the only time I encourage theft, okay? You can steal this illustration. Give the illustration of this, and I gave this presentation in the class after I gave the evidence for personhood legally, and then the philosophical evidence for what counts as essential personhood from conception. The next phase is that now PGB stuff, okay? Now, what's the problem? Okay, now here's the illustration, and I've got these, our two opponents were these two Wiccan chicks who were just glaring at us the whole time. Which, by the way, is one of the funniest moments I've ever had when I was in law school, was after I made the case for essential personhood, the response from one of the gals was, "But they're so small." And I said, "Really? So you think midgets have less rights than big persons?" And they just made a face. And I said, of course, for me, I'm a big guy. So I stood next to this very small woman. "So you're saying I have more rights than you because I'm bigger than you?" So they literally were just doing this, their faces turning red and all this. They almost flew away on their broomsticks at that point. But reality is this. So I said, here's the illustration. So, and use this, please use this illustration. So let's say that you have a building demolition business and you are hired to demolish one of these big skyscrapers in downtown Manhattan. And I'll tell you, you've seen that. You have some 30-story skyscraper because they want to build another one there. That's a very precise business. You spent days setting charges in the building, cuts, so they would fall at exactly the right place and time. And then what do you have on standby? You're talking about the middle of New York City. So for you to have to block off traffic, do all of this stuff, well, you've got dozens and dozens of dump trucks. You've got, all sorts of heavy equipment to put the rubble into it and all of that. You're talking about millions of dollars at stake. I mean, in hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour trying to get this stuff done. So here's the scenario. Your foreman says, okay, we're ready to go. And so now you hooked up the detonator and you're about to wait for the go. And then all of a sudden, another person runs up and says, wait, don't push the button. Why? We just found a little red tricycle parked in front of the entrance to the building, and it wasn't there 5 minutes ago. And so, hey, time is money, right? What do you do? And then about 2 minutes later, mom frantically comes up and says, have you seen my daughter? She was riding a red tricycle. So now all your little bean counters are saying, you know what? Time is money, man. We're doing $500,000 an hour here on standby. Everyone's on standby. This is costing us money. So they calculated there's only a 50% chance that the little girl's in the building and in the blast zone. So what you do, and I did this to my opponents, I said, would you push the button? Now, well, there's only a 50% possibility that the little girl's in the building, and they're like, grumble, grumble, grumble. So, okay, 25% possibility the little girl's in the building. You gonna push the button? Then grumble, 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 and I went all the way down to, 10%, 5%, 1%. And I said, that's right. I said, seriously, are you gonna push the button and blow the building up? I said, yeah. Why? And I said, here's why. Because you're not dealing with potential human life, you're potentially dealing with innocent human life. And we know that the standard based on that illustration is when you're dealing with human life in the image of God, which is the highest and most valuable thing in creation, that PGB dictates that we use extreme caution when we're dealing with destroying innocent human life. And we won, they lost, and there it is. So we won the case. But this is how you effectively use these probability, not only, for, preponderance of the evidence, yeah, you're there. What if it's below that? Then you want to give probability times the gravity and so forth, which means now you better be ready to make the case, okay? Not only just for Christianity as a whole, but what we're going to do is, and I'll come back a little bit later with some additional evidences and types of things, but we start with, is there enough proof, is there enough evidence to at least get to a preponderance of the evidence that the Bible is in fact inspired by God and without error, and that this ultimately is what defines who God is and what true religion is. So if so, now you've got the beginnings of making the case, and that's after we do canonicity and we do transmission and do all of that. But at least you have proof that the Bible in the autographs is in fact inspired and inerrant. Okay. So again, more on that next time. We'll look at the actual types of proof for inspiration and inerrancy, but we'll see you next time.